Absolutely. My name is Stephanie Giese, and I am an indie author and a freelance writer. I worked for about 15 years in the world of freelance writing, creating content for magazines and newspapers and online publications and nonprofits. And I'm in a few humor anthologies. I have a memoir, and I am transitioning now into the world of fiction and specifically romance. And I have two new adult romances that are going to be coming out in 2025. But today we're going to be talking about Out of Left Field, which is a new adult sports romance.
What inspired Out of Left Field?
It was actually inspired by my grandparents. My dad's dad was a minor league baseball player in Elmira, New York. And I started wanting to tell the story of my grandparents. Um, he played in the 1940s, and I thought that would be a really cool story. But then I very quickly realized I did not actually want to write a love story about my own grandparents.
Fair
So,
enough.
so I modernized it, and a lot of the characters are based on people that I know sort of, but not really. Like, for example, I did live with my grandmother. Like, my main character, Danielle, lives with her grandmother. But Honey, the grandmother character, is based on the grandmother on the other side of my family who had a very big personality.
It's really cool that you can take bits and pieces from like people you're around you to put insert into your story. I completely understand not wanting to write a story about your grandparents' romance. So, what drew you to writing?
I have always wanted to be a writer from like a very, very young age. I remember my mom, when I was about 4 years old, she would read me The Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis, and I would just sit for hours and listen to her read. And even when I would play, I would make up stories, like make up plays to perform with my friends, or just make up stories to act out with my stuffed animals. And then being in school, I remember being maybe like 8 years old and realizing that somebody wrote the stories in our textbooks, like our reading textbooks, and wanting to write those. And I always wondered, are you familiar with American Girl dolls? Have you
Yes,
ever
I
seen
have
those?
heard of it. Yeah, I've seen them.
Right. They were these dolls that we had that would come with books, but back in the early 90s, those books did not have the authors on the cover. And so I
Okay.
remember thinking like somebody wrote those books and one day I want it to be me. Like,
We have like Cabbage Patch Pit kids here, but not we don't
mhm.
really have the American dolls. But yeah,
Yeah.
I've seen some and the outfits and everything, so it's like fair enough.
Yeah.
How did you choose which character to center the story around?
Um, that was kind of tricky. I knew that I wanted it to be a baseball romance about a small town baseball player. And I knew that I wanted to do a dual point of view romance because that's what I enjoy reading the most
Yeah.
as a reader. And so I wasn't really sure who I wanted the female main character to be. I just knew that I wanted her to be strong. And it's kind of a pet peeve of mine when there are underdeveloped female leads in romance books. So I wanted a stronger female lead.
How did you find writing from a male perspective to compare to a female perspective?
I thought it wasn't too hard because romance, especially as a genre, is a lot about the emotion.
Mm.
And so I think that that was pretty similar. And because part of the plot of this story is about what Mike has gone through in the past and his situation, he is a recovering addict from narcotics. And so, like, that plot was kind of built in already. So I knew that I had a lot of meat there that I could go with. So it wasn't too much like I wasn't worried too much about like being in a male body.
Okay. What was your process for writing your book? Are you a plotter or are you a pantser?
I'm definitely a pantser completely and fully. I have absolutely no idea what's going to happen. Like I don't really have a process other than sitting down and actually starting to write. And I have no idea what's going to happen until it happens.
It surprises you and it's more creative that I find it's a bit more creative that way instead of having to sort of stick
I
to
think
a
so.
strict outline.
Yeah, I think so. It definitely it can get overwhelming. Then I
Yeah.
wind up with a lot of stuff that wasn't really relevant. I'm like, but I liked that scene, but it doesn't fit anymore. But it's fun though.
How did you approach world and character building? I know it's a more contemporary story, so did you really have to think much about the world that you were building around your
The
characters?
world is, yeah, the world itself, it's set in a small town in Virginia called North Bay that is based on an area called Reedville where my aunt and uncle do currently live. And I used to go and spend a week there with them every summer. It's a very small town, kind of like a no red lights kind of a town, where like half the roads aren't paved and you have to drive a half an hour to go to the grocery store. Um, so that was kind of built in already because I had experiences in a small town similar to that. I'm sorry, I forgot the second half of your question already.
And the character building, how did you approach character building?
The characters I just wanted to be, I knew I wanted them to be funny and I knew I wanted them to be strong and I wanted the story itself, I wanted to show consent in friendly and realistic ways. And so I just wanted to kind of build a relationship and show that attraction, but in ways that were healthy and modeled communication.
Did you do any like pre-planning with your characters, like a character bio or anything like that? What their
I
age or
really didn't. Like, I really just sit down and
and
start
just write it.
typing. But I have been a writer for a long time. So I think at this point, a lot of that stuff just comes naturally. I did used to do that kind of stuff like years ago.
Did you have a favorite moment to write in out of left field?
I did. There is a scene that involves a lot of M&Ms and their first kiss scene. That was a scene that I knew was going to be in the book. I knew from the very beginning, like I had a picture of this scene particularly in my head for the book. So that was definitely my favorite one.
Which of your characters do you relate to the most and why?
I think Danielle, because her thought process is very similar to mine in terms of the way that she makes decisions. And also, a lot of her life experiences are similar to mine in that she is living with her grandmother while she was in college and finding the guy that she eventually is going to be with while she's in college, which are all things that really did happen to me in real life.
It's always good to have like reflect a reflection of you in the story as
Yeah,
well. Maybe not completely correct, but sort of
sure.
bits of
Yeah.
you in it.
Yeah.
How has writing and publishing books changed the way you see yourself?
Um, I think that, well, it made me see myself as an author for
Yeah.
a long time as a writer until you're published. I I do believe that as long as you're writing, you are a writer, but I think a lot of writers have that imposter syndrome until they see their words in print and somebody's purchasing them and someone else like paid them to print them. Um, so it gave me the identity, I guess, of being an author, and I could say that now with confidence. And it also showed me that I can write books, which sounds silly to say out loud, but I found it so much easier to write out of left field and Right as Rain, which will be the book that comes after it, because I had already written my memoir. So my memoir took me 5 years to write because it was the first full-length book that I wrote by myself, and I kind of was figuring out the process of the structure and all of that. And Out of Left Field took me 5 months to write
Oh,
because it was like I knew that I could do it because I had already done it. So I think it's kind of almost like people who run multiple marathons. Like I know that I can do that because I did it already.
practice makes perfect.
Sure.
Practice gives more experience more than perfect.
Yeah,
Maybe.
exactly.
Are there any books or authors that inspired you to become a writer?
Yeah, Judy Blume is my favorite writer of all time. I still remember being in the fifth grade, so around 10 years old, and reading Just as Long as We're Together. The main character in that book is named Stephanie, which is my name. So that was like my favorite book for a while when I was younger. But just seeing that she wrote stories about real life things that
Mm.
were like had depth, but were still funny and that people wanted to read and people wanted to read these stories about her real life and she was talking about subjects like girls' bodies and divorce and body image and bullying before anybody else was really talking
Mm.
about that stuff. Uh,
It's always important to read and see that dealt with really well in books, and not just sort of a flyaway sort of scene
mhm.
in books.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to a writer working on their first book?
I think I remember people saying this to me and it was really annoying to hear, but the the best piece of advice is just to write it
Mm.
because a lot of people kind of get in their head about like, well, when do I start looking for an agent and when should I reach out to publishers and should I decide right now if I'm going to self-publish or traditionally publish? And you can't do any of that until it is actually written. So just write it.
You can't do anything if it's not there. I have a mad. I've got a book that I have in my head, but I haven't
hmm
written it yet. Pretty
Yeah,
hard to get backing with the book.
it is hard to find time, I think, especially as moms or oh, I don't know if you're a mom or not, but like I have 5 kids, and so it's definitely hard to find the time to just like, when am I going to do this?
Yeah. What's your favorite writing snack or drink?
Um, Water's not my favorite, but I always do have water. But I think probably mint tea. I find that helps to like with concentration and focus. Peppermint's supposed to do that. I don't know if there's actually any like scientific reason behind that, but I've heard that and it seems to help me just like have that ritual anyway of like, okay, I'm gonna drink this warm mint tea and like hone in now. Um, and chocolate just because it's chocolate.
You need chocolate.
Yeah.
Do you play music while you write? And if you do, what's your favorite music?
I have a writing playlist that I will play before I write to kind of get myself out of mom mode and into writer mode, but I can't do it while I'm writing. While I'm writing, I need like just complete quiet because I just can't have the input, especially other words coming in.
I was going to ask you because I don't know how you would listen if you're like trying to do dialogue or anything with
Yeah,
actual
I
lyrics.
can't I cannot do that, but I do have a playlist of um kind of like folky things like the Civil Wars, um the Oh Hellos and those kinds of things. And sometimes I'll make a playlist for a specific book, for certain songs that inspire scenes or whatever.
And my final question is, who has been the biggest supporter of your writing?
Definitely my husband is the biggest supporter, just like logistically. He helps with a lot of like my book formatting. And he's very encouraging for me to be able to take the time and like handle the kids while I'm doing this. And, you know, as it does, it takes hours of time to be able to
Yeah.
sit down and write. And we're also very fortunate that I was home with the kids before I got into writing. So, which is because of his career and like the financial stability that it affords us. And I know not a lot of people aren't in the privileged position to be able to do that. So I did have extra time just because of that.
It's really good to have people around you to support you and
Yeah,
sort of be a cheerleader to get
yeah,
through.
absolutely.